Good evening. In the news tonight, the Vincennes Parks Department wants your input on the future of Rainbow Beach Swimming Pool. Congress has reached a bipartisan deal to avert a government shutdown. And in sports, pairings have been released for next week's boys and girls soccer sectionals. News Center 22 starts now.
Local news, weather, and sports. Produced through the combined efforts of the students, staff, and faculty of Vincennes University's electronic media program, this is News Center 22.
As a Vincennes resident, what do you want to do with Rainbow Beach? Good evening for News Center 22. I'm Mitch Columbi. Tonight is the night to voice your opinion on fixing Rainbow Beach Swimming Pool, building a new one, constructing something different, or doing nothing at all. Vincennes Parks Department Steve Beeman says city officials need to know what to do about the community pool, which is outdated and costing the city a lot of money to maintain. Beeman added they've seen a decline in attendance at the pool over the last 15 years. Tonight's meeting is at 6 p.m. at City Hall. Officials with Good Samaritan Hospital are seeking areas near the hospital rezoned from residential to commercial use. Attorney Brent Stuckey told members of the Vincennes City Council last night that the hospital is planning a multi-million-dollar renovation to its campus. In order to do so, Stuckey says that any new construction must be in a commercially zoned area. Because some properties owned by the hospital are still zoned residential, he asked the council to make the necessary changes. The hospital's request was forwarded to the Knox County Area Plan Commission for further review. Good Samaritan is planning a $100 million renovation of its campus, including a 120-bed, 5-story inpatient tower, redesign of key healthcare service areas, and an upgrade of the hospital's critical engineering systems. The FBI has joined the investigation into a Daviess County Sheriff's deputy. Sheriff Jerry Harbstreet says he's requested the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate Chief Deputy Ron Morgan. Harbstreet released a statement Monday night saying he became aware of improper actions with ongoing narcotics investigations. Morgan was placed on administrative leave with pay earlier this month, pending an internal investigation. Morgan will stay on leave until the state and federal investigations are completed. Vincennes police arrested a local man yesterday in connection with a break-in at a local business. Shortly before 9 a.m., police were informed of a man putting guitars over the seawall. An investigation led to the discovery of a burglary at Kemp Music at 24 North 1st Street. Police located 26-year-old Jeconiah Newberry hiding inside a trunk at the rear of a building. Newberry was arrested and charged with burglary. He also was wanted on warrants out of both Pike and Gibson counties. The Washington Board of Public Works and Safety yesterday opened bids for the raising of a house at 310 East William Street. Don Gress Construction was awarded the contract with a low bid of $13,800. Mayor Larry Haig said the property owner had been given multiple opportunities to take care of the situation, but had neglected to do anything, and the property had become a safety and health concern. City Attorney Jeff Norris said the city will attempt to recoup the demolition expenses from the property owner. Washington's newest police officer was sworn in by Mayor Larry Haig prior to last night's City Council meeting. Brandon Humphreys took the oath in front of a large and enthusiastic crowd of family and friends. Humphreys, a Washington native, is a veteran with 3 deployments under his belt. Prior to becoming a police officer, Humphreys has been employed at the Daviess County Security Center and has been a reserve officer with the Washington Police Department. Indiana State Police are continuing the investigation into the 5 bodies found inside a home in Franklin County Sunday. Police do not have any suspects or persons of interest at this time. 4 of the autopsies have been completed, with the final autopsy to be done this morning. Neighbors identified the victims as Roy Napier, his ex-wife Angela, along with Roy's son Jake and daughter Melissa. The 5th victim was 43-year-old Henry Smith, whose body was reportedly found at a nearby home. An Indiana attorney who's suing on behalf of victims of the State Fair tragedy filed a federal lawsuit against the state Monday. Kenneth J. Allen says the state has no right to place caps on damages paid out to victims who file suit against the state. Allen says the current cap of $5 million on tort claims, including class action suits, doesn't begin to compensate victims of tragedies like the State Fair stage collapse that claimed the lives of 7. State School Superintendent Tony Bennett expects to ask legislators next year to toughen the law, allowing the state to take over schools with consistently low test scores. This summer, the state took over Gary Roosevelt High School and 5 Indianapolis schools, but next year, only 1 school in Indianapolis is in danger of a takeover. Bennett wants legislators to cut the probation window to 4 years while authorizing the state to offer assistance earlier. Bennett says he'll await an estimate of how much the change would cost before officially placing it on his legislative agenda for next year. Indiana wants a judge to approve its new law that blocks funding to abortion providers such as Planned Parenthood. Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller filed a brief Monday asking a federal appeals court to lift the lower court's ban on the state law. It was in effect earlier this summer and had cut off Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood of Indiana. If the state law is allowed, it would block taxpayer dollars for abortion providers. A judge will hear the case in Chicago on October 20th. Still to come on News Center 22, Democrats and Republicans have reached accord on a bipartisan deal to keep the federal government from shutting down. And 2 American hikers have returned home after being arrested for spying in Iran. Stay with us.
On Nova, a disaster unfolds in gripping detail.
Flying along the coast is horrifying.
Now, eyewitness accounts and new evidence on the ground help scientists piece together the most complete picture yet of what triggered the catastrophe.
The energy that drove this earthquake had been building up for a couple of hundred years.
10 billion tons of water.
Reaching at times the speed of a jet aircraft.
An in-depth investigation of Japan's killer quake.
Americans were down and out. They were losing their jobs and their houses, and they wanted a hero that was beat up like they were.
What do they call him? Seabiscuit.
This horse had to come from the bottom of the heap.
They're head on head. It's horse against horse.
For a brief moment, a little brown racehorse wasn't just a little brown racehorse.
Seabiscuit on American Experience.
Seabiscuit is the winner.
The spending showdown is over. A bipartisan budget deal has been reached in the Senate. Democrats and Republicans figuring out a way to keep the government operating while keeping the aid flowing for thousands of Americans who've been hit by natural disasters. It's an agreement made possible not by compromise, but by FEMA. Kate Baldwin with how the deal got done.
In a series of votes, the Senate was able to pull off what it hasn't been able to do to this point as another government shutdown looms. Reach bipartisan agreement to avert that very scenario. This deal came after FEMA announced it will be able to stretch its current money in its disaster relief fund to make it through the end of the week without running dry, which it had previously said was not likely. Now, this is key because the end of the week is also the end of the current fiscal year, effectively making the central obstacle to reaching an agreement on how to keep the government funded a moot point. Democrats and Republicans had all along been battling over whether or not the additional funding they wanted to give FEMA for disaster recovery efforts needed to be paid for by cutting spending elsewhere, but only the money that they were offering for the rest of this current fiscal year ending Friday. Republicans said yes, it should be paid for. Democrats had been saying no. Well, now that issue is off the table, so the Senate approved a measure to fund the government through November 18th and also give an additional some $2.6 billion to FEMA for the next fiscal year. But that part was not in dispute. Now the House still needs to have its say on this short-term spending measure. Kate Baldwin, CNN, Washington.
Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels spoke about reining in the nation's debt while promoting his new book. Speaking before members of the American Enterprise Institute on Monday, the governor said the country is on track to permanently stunt the economy.
We are facing a survival level threat to the America we've known, that it is its principal symptom, not its cause, but its principal symptom is the debts we've amassed for ourselves and the debts that are coming if we don't change direction in a significant way, that they threaten something even larger than our standard of living. They threaten the sense of optimism, which has always animated this country in good times or bad, that in which Americans, stubbornly have said, even in bad times, tomorrow will be better, my kids will live better than I will. And if that's fraying around the edges, that is really something to worry about, quite apart from GDP and median income rates and all those things that we tend to write and talk about.
Daniels was promoting his new book, Keeping the Republic, Saving America by Trusting Americans, which he said is not autobiographical or a candidate's book. Instead, Daniels characterized it as a few reflections on the most important national conversation that we've had in a long time. The American hikers accused of spying in Iran are waking up in the United States. 2 of them arrived in New York Sunday, and now they're sharing details about their 781 days behind bars for the first time. Rick Vincent reports.
The hikers held prisoner in Iran after apparently crossing the Iranian border in 2009 are back together on U.S. soil. Speaking Sunday, they called Iranian officials liars for calling them spies.
In prison, we lived in a world of lies and false hope. From the very start, the only reason we have been held hostage is because we are American.
No evidence was ever presented against us. That is because there is no evidence, and because we are completely innocent.
Shane Bauer and Josh Fatale were finally freed last week. A third hiker, Sarah Shord, was released last year. Now engaged to Bauer, she says a huge burden is lifted off their chests.
But we all saw Shane and Josh run down those stairs. Nothing was holding them back. They were ready and so eager to re-enter the world.
The release ends 2 years of agony for the hikers' parents as well.
One waits for this day so long, you have pictured it in your mind so many. I couldn't have asked for anything better.
We're taking this minute by minute, day by day. We all have a new path, and it's going to take time for all of us to get back into life again. But I know it will happen.
I'm Rick Vincent reporting.
The men said they were held in near complete isolation. They say they were allowed only 15 minutes of telephone calls with their families throughout the ordeal, and they waged hunger strikes to get their letters from loved ones. An attorney for Sarah Palin today notified author Joe McGinnis and his publisher that Palin's attorney and Palin may sue over what they call the lies and rumors presented as fact in McGinnis's new book, The Rogue. The book has received widespread attention since McGinnis moved in next door to Palin to begin writing in 2010. Shortly before the book hit shelves last week, Palin's husband Todd lashed out at McGinnis, saying the author had been relentlessly stalking his family and filed the book with lies, innuendo, and smears. McGinnis has staunchly defended the title. The book has received criticism from a number of news outlets, including the New York Times, which said the book chases caustic, unsubstantiated gossip. The trial against the doctor accused in Michael Jackson's death gets underway today. Jackson died June 25, 2009 after overdosing on the surgical anesthetic propofol and other drugs. Prosecutors allege Dr. Conrad Murray was the one who administered the propofol. They say Jackson was using it as a sleep aid. Murray pleaded not guilty to involuntary manslaughter in Jackson's death. If convicted, he faces up to 4 years behind bars. For most infants, breastfeeding provides the best source of nutrients and protection from illness. Shelby Lynn tells us more in today's Health Minute.
While a new study from the American Academy of Pediatrics finds that fewer hospitals are sending new moms home with samples of infant formula than in the past, the majority still do. Studies have shown most moms say they want to breastfeed, but they may give up nursing in favor of formula if breastfeeding isn't going well right away. The researchers say when hospitals give mothers free formula, it's as if they're encouraging formula feeding. Health officials recommend infants be fed breast milk exclusively for the first 6 months of life. If possible, they say moms should continue to nurse their child until the baby is at least a year old. That's because breast milk has been called the perfect food source for babies. It provides antibodies to help newborns ward off illness until the immune system matures enough to produce their own. Mom's milk also provides important hormones that help baby regulate how much it needs to eat. Plus, studies have shown that breastfeeding reduces diarrhea, ear infections, and bacterial meningitis, and cuts the risk for sudden infant death syndrome, diabetes, asthma, and obesity. Mom and baby need time to learn how to breastfeed, so if you're having problems, seek help from a health professional. For today's Health Minute, I'm Shelby Lynn.
Danny Taborn checks in now with a look at weather. Danny, how's that promise of drier weather holding up?
Well, Mitch, you know, there's not a guarantee with Mother Nature. There is still a chance for some lingering showers through tomorrow, but the outlook for the rest of the week is shaping up to be a good one. I'll tell you why with News Center 22 returns.